G'day divers and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking all about using your mobile phone underwater to capture great underwater videography. Now it's become normal place for people to use their mobile phones to use them to take photos and video above water, but did you know that you can now take your mobile phone underwater and use those excellent photo options to grab great video and great photos with a mobile phone? Now, a mobile phone isn't a cheap option as far as cameras are concerned, and if you were going out just to buy a mobile phone to take underwater videography, I'd say it's way too expensive. But the thing is, we all own a mobile phone. It's already in our pocket, it's already free. So the camera aspect, to me, is a free option. All you need to now take it underwater is to buy a low-cost housing, and you can get awesome underwater videography. One thing I wanted to highlight is every single shot in this video is taken with a mobile phone. In this instance, a Google Pixel 9 Pro, but it won't matter which mobile phone you've got, as long as you've got one of the later model phones that can capture 4K 60 video. Now, I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to put clickbait up. If you're using a mobile phone, it is not the same as using a $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 full frame camera underwater. But you still can capture great shots, and every single underwater shot in this video is taken with a mobile phone. Nowhere in any of my videos will I ever be talking about a camera and be using another camera. It really annoys me. There's a lot of videos online talking about using mobile phones underwater or action cameras or all your low-end cameras, and in reality a lot of the shots they're showing you are taken with high-end cameras like full-frame DSLRs or GH7s, and it is not the same. So every single shot that I show you, I can guarantee you was shot with a Google Pixel 9 Pro. There is no magic settings, there's no magic post-production. I will be bringing out videos telling you exactly how I do it. But if you follow those instructions, anybody can capture images like these, and I'm using really cheap aftermarket accessories. So the lights that I'm using here were worth 85 Australian dollars each. That's only like 50 US dollars each. There's no need to go out and spend thousands of dollars on accessories. So if you're new to my channel, I'm Sean Elliott and I've been doing underwater videography for about 25 years. These days, I like to specialize in taking footage with low-cost cameras like action cameras and mobile phones and pairing them with cheap aftermarket accessories and then showing you how you too can get into underwater videography and photography at a very economical price but still get great footage. Now in today's video, I'm going to talk about underwater housings because that is the one thing that you need to take your phone underwater. Then we're going to talk about the pros of using your mobile phone. We're going to talk about the cons of using your mobile phone because it's not all rainbows and lollipops. And then we'll talk about, right at the end, is it better to use a mobile phone, an action camera, a compact camera? I'm not even going to touch on DSLRs because this isn't clickbait. If you see a video that says, oh look at my Apple iPhone 16, it's as good as a $5,000 full frame camera, that's clickbait and it's a lie. Now, you've always been able to take a good shot with a low-end camera. If I take a specific shot with a low-end camera and then compare the same shot to a high-end camera, and especially when I put it in a small setup like you're looking at it on your phone, then yeah, they're going to look similar, but that is nonsense, so we're not going to cover that. If you think that you can take a tiny little camera with a tiny little lens and a tiny little sensor and then compare it to a full frame camera with a very expensive lens, then you're joking yourself, okay? So you can get some great videos and photos, but the first key is knowing what your limitations are and what the best time is to use that small camera. But me sitting here and lying to you saying, no, that's a waste of time going out and spending a fortune on a camera is a lie. But what I'll say is this, if you didn't know that, then you don't need to be spending a fortune on a high-end camera. When you are good enough and you can get great footage with a cheap camera, then it's worth going and buying a high-end camera. Now I want to apologize if there's any weather noise in the background. I'm doing my best to get rid of it, but one reason I'm in here doing a talking head video is because the weather is atrocious. If the weather was good enough for diving, I'd be out diving, but at the moment it is horrible out there. So I've done my best to try and stop any of the noise, but it is really windy and really heavy rain, so I apologize if there's any poor sound quality in this video. So let's talk about underwater housings, because you can't take your mobile phone underwater without an underwater housing, and there's only one housing I'd recommend, and that's the Divevolk Seatouch Max 4 Plus housing. Now, The reason I recommend this housing isn't because I'm sponsored, because I'm not. I paid for this housing completely myself, and this was actually a Christmas present. So I did all the research, I decided what housing was the best, and I purchased it and then pretended that my wife gave it to me. But the reason this housing is the best is quite easy. One, it's a generic housing, so this will take any mobile phone. You just ask for a different adapter depending on which mobile phone you have. Now when I say any, some of the folds and ridiculously large phones aren't going to fit, and there's no real way of taking any of them underwater. But it will take an iPhone 16 Max Pro and all the larger XL phones, just probably not those fold ones. But if you go to their website, it'll tell you which phones will fit in there, and you can just email them and they'll tell you if your phone can be put in there. But it will take basically all standard single frame mobile phones, which means that now or in the future you can keep the housing and just get a new adapter. The adapters are cheap, they cost like $20. So this is the one for my Google Pixel 9 Pro. That comes free with your first housing. If you change your phone, then you just let them know, and for $20 I think it is, you get another one. Or if you have access to a 3D printer, they will let you download the plans for free and you can just print as many as you like. So it future-proofs your mobile phone purchases, and that is one of the big reasons that mobile phones are so popular for doing photography and videography, because it's the camera you've always got on you. So that's where it also becomes cheap from an underwater point of view, because if you're already buying a phone and you've already spent all that money and it's already in your pocket, you might as well use it for all the other features that you can use. And just like you can use it above water now, and it's pretty much got rid of compact cameras, it's the same reason underwater. So if you use this housing, it's not specific to your model or your brand, and you can just keep using it year after year. For instance, I've gone from Apple to Samsung to Google, and God knows what my next phone will be. I change my mind every time. I have reasons. I'm not going to really go into why or which phone is better, because it's personal taste. At the end of the day, the key to using your mobile underwater really is it's cheap, because you're going to use the mobile you already have. Would I recommend you go out and buy a brand new top of the range mobile phone to use an underwater camera, and that's the only reason? Absolutely not. For that sort of money, you could go out and buy a GH6 body. So I wouldn't recommend it for that. But if you already have a phone in your pocket, like we all do, paying $229 for a housing US is a very economical way to then be able to take it underwater. The second reason why a Divevolk housing is the best underwater housing is because it's the only housing that has a membrane on the back. So it's not buttons that it's using to make your phone work, it is using your phone just like it does above water. This membrane allows me to touch my phone and use all the touch system just like your phone above water. And that is the biggest game changer. Now there are some minor downsides to that, and I'll go into that in a full video on the Divevolk. But all the positives way outweigh the negatives. And that's because I now have full access and use of my mobile phone. When I put the mobile phone in this housing and I'm on the boat, I can use my phone just like it is above water. I have reception, I can send text messages, I can make phone calls, I can scroll the internet, I can use my phone just like I would if it wasn't in the housing, whilst having all the protection of the underwater housing. That's also great for safety, because if I'm diving with this and I come up and I've drifted away from the boat, as soon as that phone is out of the water and my reception kicks back in, I can send a text message, I can call for help, I can use an app to mark my GPS position. I mean, how many times have you used your phone with your friends to go, here I am, and drop a pin? Well, you can literally do that while you're drifting out there in the ocean, drop a pin and tell people exactly where you are. So even if you don't use your mobile phone as your primary video and photo setup, by having this housing, you have all those features of your phone underwater and on the surface whilst being protected. So again, underwater, you've got other features. Like, one of the biggest advantages from a video and photo point of view is I now have access to all the apps. I don't have to just use the Google camera app in my Google phone or the iPhone app in the iPhone. I can use as many apps as I want. I'll often jump between 3 or 4 different apps depending on the shot that I'm taking. So with the Pixel 9 Pro, there are shots, because I have full access to Android's AI system, that are better in Google Camera. There are a lot of reasons why I don't like Google Camera, and I'll be doing a full video on just the Pixel 9 Pro. But then I can jump into another app like Blackmagic, which is totally free, and get full control over the video and the photo functions. So unlike a lot of the other housings where they connect via cable or Bluetooth or wirelessly, and then they just have generic or the same buttons as a camera, that has the advantage of it has that more camera feel, and it's a little bit easier to use, especially with gloves, and you don't have to worry about the screen timing out and things like that. But they have no access to anything else. I have full access to my phone. I can access every app. The only difference is obviously underwater I have no mobile phone coverage or data, and as soon as I hit the surface and the phone comes out of the water, I get all that back. So I can watch movies underwater on a deco stop. There's nothing better if you're stuck there for an hour in the cold, stuck to the roof of a cave with nothing to do but look at wet rock. Watch a movie, play Candy Crush, start editing your photos. Do whatever you like that you can use on your phone. You just obviously don't have any internet access. So there's some massive advantages to using this housing. If you're interested, please subscribe to the channel, because I will be doing a video specifically on this housing, and I'll also be doing it specifically for setting up the Pixel 9 Pro. I do actually still have access to Apple iPhones and Samsungs, so I may do those videos as well, but I've spent a lot more time underwater with the Google Pixel 9. So like I said, this is my housing. I bought it through all my own research, and I love it because of using it, and it's quite simply easy to say it's the best when it A, is a generic housing, so it future-proofs things, and B, I have full access to my phone. Those two things are just way above any other pros or cons you can have between the housings. Now, I did approach them after I started using it, and after I realized that I was going to recommend it, and said, can I have any affiliate program? Which they had, and they were happy to give it to me. So in the description there is a link. If you press on that, you'll get a 5% discount using my affiliate code, but I only got that because I knew I was going to promote this housing, and it's my own opinion. I'm never going to promote anything that I wouldn't use, and I'm also never going to show you footage that wasn't taken with the equipment that I'm saying I'm using. So as I said earlier, every single underwater shot in this video was taken with the Google Pixel 9 Pro by me in a Divevolk housing. There is no wet lenses actually used in this video at all. It is just a couple of cheap $85, Australian $85 too, that's like 50 US dollars each, lights with the Divevolk housing and the Google mobile phone, and most of these shots are actually just in the standard Google camera app. I have been playing around with other apps, but I'll leave that footage for the full Google camera review. That is one thing that's nice about this housing. I can use any app I want, but I wanted this video to be more about generic mobile phones, and since you mightn't get this housing, you'll be stuck to your generic video app. All the shots in here will be taken with the generic Google camera app. There is no craziness. I'm not shooting in RAW. I'm not doing some crazy post-production. If you have two 85 Australian dollar lights, a Divevolk housing and a mobile phone, you can get these shots. There's no doubt about it. So let's go to the pros first. Now, one reason I wanted to talk about the housing first is a huge amount of the pros of using your mobile phone underwater are because of the Divevolk housing. To be honest, if you're going to use a specific housing just for your phone, one that's designed to just allow it to take underwater photos and videos using your generic phone app, is a lot of the other pros are gone. So a pro with that would be you already own a mobile phone and you're going to buy a housing and put it underwater. There really isn't any other pros. It doesn't allow you to use any of the other functions of your mobile phone, so you're using it purely as a camera. So the pro there is you already own a mobile phone, so effectively it's free. I would never go out and buy a high-end mobile phone just to put it in an underwater housing. Like in Australia at the moment, I think an Apple or a Samsung or the Google, they're all just over 2,000 Australian dollars for the phones. Now for that sort of money, that is a lot of money if you look at it from a camera point of view. It is 4 times as much as buying an action camera. So am I recommending that you go out and buy a mobile phone to use it underwater? No. What I'm saying is you already own a mobile phone. It is free. That is why mobile phones have become the most used camera above water, because it happens to be the camera you have on you. It's already in your pocket. So I'm using the same theory, but underwater. Is you already own the phone, and it's only going to cost you $229 to buy a Divevolk Housing to take it underwater and become your primary underwater video and photo camera. The next pro is, if you're using the Divevolk Housing, is that you're going to continuously need to buy a new mobile phone. I mean, most people get a new phone every 1 or 2 years. If that's not you, that's up to you, but most people on a plan, and every 12 months to 36 months they're going to be getting a new phone. And the one area where there's been a lot more development, I feel, in the last few years is mobile phones. There's a lot of money being thrown at the phone section of mobile phones, because let's face it, mobile phones have been able to make a phone call and send a text message for well over 20 years. Smartphones, I think the first Apple phone was pushing 20 years as well. So the phone section is pretty much irrelevant. So they need to look at things that consumers love, and one big section is photos and videos. They are used to capture most of the world's photos and videos now. So there's a lot of development going into that. And if you look at the difference in changes, say from an Apple 14 to the Apple 16, or this, Samsung S21, S22 to the current model, or even in the Pixels, there's been a massive improvement. And in that same time, if you look at other cameras, especially say action cameras, I mean, I love my action cameras, but there hasn't been a massive development in picture quality in them the same as phones are. And I'm wondering, the mobile phone pretty much destroyed the compact market. There's still a place for it, but it killed it. And if GoPro and the other action cameras don't keep pushing themselves, mobile phones are going to start to surpass them. Really, the only thing they've got is they are action cameras, so they're a lot more smaller and versatile and less destructible. But we're putting our mobile phone in a housing, so a lot of that thing is not relevant anymore. So soon, I'll touch on later on picture quality, but it's getting really close. And GoPro has had no change in their hardware for several generations now. And even if I go back to, say, the Hero 5 all the way to the Hero 13, what have we got? We've gone from 4K 60 to 5.3K 60. There was one jump at the Hero 10. Now I know there's been other parts, but as far as underwater videography, that is the key part. There hasn't been a massive change in the picture quality. Whereas in mobile phones, if you take the same period from back when the Hero 5 was there to the Hero 13, there's been a huge improvement. So I'll be interested to see in the future what those changes are. And one thing about using a Divevolk Housing means next year or the year after, you just buy the next model camera, get the new adapter, shove it in the housing, and away you go. So the other advantage of, say, a mobile phone is your creative control. It is much closer to using a normal camera than, say, an action camera, because you have multiple lenses. Most times these days you'll have an ultra-wide lens, you'll have a main lens, and you'll have a telephoto lens, you'll have macro lenses. So you can take a much bigger range of shots than, say, using an action camera. It is also allows you full access to your camera, especially again if you're using the Divevolk Housing and using an aftermarket app. If I'm using Blackmagic, I have full control over white balance, not just temperature but also tint. I can change the ISO, shutter speeds, frame rates, everything underwater. I have focus peaking, and focus is probably a big key. If you're using an action camera, you're going to always have everything in focus, and that makes life very easy, but it also has that action camera look, because every shot you have is in focus, basically from 1 foot in front of the camera to infinity. And that is great because it's easy, but it doesn't give you much creative control. If you want to be able to start using some bokeh and getting some blurred backgrounds and just highlighting the one subject, then again, by using a mobile phone, you've got that sort of full camera control, and you can get a lot more creative control underwater. And then the last probably massive advantage, and again this comes back to the Divevolk Housing, is that you have full access to all the other things that a mobile phone gives you. Like in the Divevolk Housing, I have an app where it looks at an animal or a coral and it tells me what it is. It's an amazing app. Now, I will admit it's not as easy to use underwater as they make out, because obviously when a fish is swimming around trying to, get it to stop long enough so it can analyze the image and tell you what fish it is, it doesn't always work. Often I find the best way to do is take a photo of it and then let the app analyze a photo. But anything that's not moving, it can tell me what it is. It's amazing, and it's great above water too. Bit of fun, don't get me wrong, but when you see something you're not sure what it is, to be able to find out underwater a lot of the time is really quite cool. It's not always perfect. I have a very friendly, very fat rabbit, and the other day I put it on him. It initially said to me that he was a domestic short-haired rabbit, which he is, and then it decided that he was an American bison, and that's because he eats way too many apples, and I can understand why the app thought that. But you can use things like that, or like I said earlier, you can watch a movie, you can listen to music, not so easy if you've got a hood on, you can play Candy Crush, you can edit your photos, your videos, you can do anything you can think that you can use your mobile phone now for, underwater without data, and then above water with data. It's amazing what things you can do above water. So again, you've got all the access to your phone, it's just in a housing and more protected. And I really do like that safety feature, the fact that if I come away from a boat and I'm drifting off, I have all my phone power and apps and access right there in my hand. I can raise it above the water, I can make a phone call, I can send a text, I can make an emergency call, I can pin my location, I can tell them where my GPS is, all those sorts of things. That is an amazing safety feature, and that alone is a good reason to buy Divevolk Housing to put your mobile phone in, even if you never use it as a video or photo capabilities, just as a safety feature. So with every pro comes cons. So let's talk about the first cons. The first thing is an expensive item to be risking underwater, and obviously if you flood the housing, you may destroy your phone. So you need to be prepared to lose your phone. I know a lot of people just can't live without their phones. I personally don't actually like mobile phones for the phone part. I really could care less if people could contact me, so I like it for the camera part. Would I be upset because I've wasted quite a lot of money? Yes, but to be honest, the odds of flooding, if you look after things properly, are a lot lower now than they used to be in the old days, and most phones now, especially the high-end phones, do have a waterproofing feature. So you not just need to flood the housing, you need to have a major issue. I mean, you'd nearly need to forget to close the housing completely and then continue the dive. Your phone should survive a short amount of time in water with all the new mobile phones, but that is a risk that you take. I mean, the other risk is you could lose it, but that's the same as anything. So you need to be prepared to risk that phone. That is the downside. Obviously, if you're using an action camera and you lose a GoPro, you're talking about a quarter or a fifth of the price of losing a brand new top of the range mobile phone at this point. Now, probably the two biggest downsides I've got, and if you've got an idea how I could get around this, then please put a comment below, is you've got no replaceable battery. So if you're diving all day, do you know what I mean? If you're using a compact or an action camera, I come up after a dive, whip out the battery, put a new battery in. Now, I know I could probably open the side of the housing and chuck a power bank on it. That works quite well. It sort of depends on how much time you've got between dives, but that's your best option. You're going to need to carry a power bank and pull it apart and plug it in. I mean, most of the new phones will last quite a long time underwater, but it is a downside. You can't just easily and quickly change a battery, or worst case scenario, you get down there and you've been using your phone all day and you haven't realized it's gone flat. That is a con. Same with storage space. I'm not aware of any of the current models that use an SD card. Unfortunately, that seems to have gone. In the early days, they'd allow you. They clearly want you to just buy bigger phones. Now, there is no way of sort of expanding the amount of storage that you have. Now, obviously, above water, you've got options with adding hard drives externally. You're just not going to have that option unless you had a purpose-built, custom-made housing. That would be pointless. It costs so much, you might as well get a proper camera. But storage is a bit of a problem. Again, if you're taking a lot, you are going to get through a few dives. It depends on what you're taking, but you're going to have to offload that somehow. I know there's options to offload it, but that's not something I really want to be doing on a dive boat. So as far as doing, 4 or 5 dives a day, this is where this is a bit of a con, because you're going to struggle with keeping enough battery and enough storage because you don't have that replaceable SD and the replaceable battery. Now the last 2 cons, one specific to the Divevolk housing and one specific to all other housings. So the first one I'll talk about is the Divevolk housing. Because you need to use the touch screen, you can't let the phone go to sleep. If the phone goes to sleep inside the housing, it can recognize that you're touching the screen, but it's not going to be able to read a fingerprint. You can't get to the side buttons, and it's not going to recognize your face because you've got a mask and a regulator in the way. Now there's ways of getting around that. I'll be doing a full video on it, and when you buy the housing they tell you all about it. There's apps that'll make sure your phone doesn't go to sleep, and you can do it in the settings, etc, etc. But that also uses battery. It would just be nice to be able to let the screen die and be able to wake it up without it still using battery, but that's something I don't know how you get around it. It recognizes the touch, but it can't recognize the fingerprint. It's also going to be phone specific, but that is a bit of a con. But it is pretty easy to leave it so it stays on all the time, and it surprisingly doesn't use as much battery as I expected. Then there's the final con is for non-Divevolk housings, which is if you're stuck to the standard camera app that is for your phone, most of them are still fairly limited even in Pro mode. They are getting a lot better, and each generation of software they seem to get better and better. Unfortunately, the photography side always seems to get a lot more focus than the video side, and although they're more than usable, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of features even when you put them in Pro mode that just are missing there that you need to get with aftermarket apps. Now again, if you've got the Divevolk housing, you can go use those aftermarket apps, and that's great. From an Android point of view, I'm really interested to see Android 16. There's some promises there with some upgrades. I'm just hoping that it's for the photo side and the video side, because there's a lot more features in the camera section than there is in the video section, and things like focus peaking is just not there for video in the standard apps. I can get that in aftermarket apps. So let's talk about the big question. Is it better to use your mobile phone or use an action camera like a GoPro or a DJI or an Insta, or buy a compact camera like a TG7? I'm not even going to compare it to mirrorless and DSLRs because they are much better. There's no doubt about it. But if you go buy a GH7, buy good housing for it, lights that match that setup, a couple of lenses, a couple of ports, you're well past $15,000. I'm talking about having a mobile phone you already own, buying a $230 housing, and maybe a couple of cheap 85 Australian lights. So what's that? $50 each. And you can get footage of what I've been showing you. That's not the same as using a $15,000 camera. And anybody who says my mobile phone, I shot it in RAW and it's as good as my DSLR, it's clickbait. Okay, there are aspects to it that yeah, I get it that you can use it within its limitations, but that is the point of low-end cameras. Full stop. It has always been that case. If you want good footage, whether it's from an action camera, a compact camera, or a mobile phone, it is learning where the limitations of that camera is. They are very good, especially these days, at taking shots and video within the limitations of that camera. So learn where your limitations are, shoot in those limitations, forget about the things you can't do, and you'll have good footage. Now, as for which one's better, it's a tough one. To be honest, going forward at the moment, I am probably going to still use both depending on what mood I'm in, depending on what I'm shooting. The GoPro or an action camera is much easier to use, without a doubt. It is an automatic, everything's automatic. You press a button and you record, or you press a button and you take a photo. You really don't have to worry about focus ever, unless you're doing macro stuff. You don't have to worry about exposure. You just drop it by half an EV. You don't have to worry about white balance, because you really can't, and you learn about white balance lock and things like that, but you don't need to adjust anything. You point it at your subject, you just make sure your lights are right, your composition's right, and you press record. It's as easy as anything. So if you're already filming with an action camera, and you're not getting the footage out of it that you want, I would persist with that, because it's the easiest form of underwater videography or photography, bar none. It is the easiest thing to use is an action camera. You do not really need to know a lot about videography and photography, because you can't make those changes anyway. But with that comes an issue. Everything looks like an action cam, everything is in focus, and you have a very limited range of ability to control what your shot is. You know, it's generally wide, or you can go to macro. You don't have a lot of control creatively. You know, you can't take those portrait type pictures with bokeh and blurred backgrounds and, you know, focus on your subject. You have far less control over where things are. You know, even if you get into macro and use a Macromate Mini, you've got a very specific distance and therefore a specific magnification and then a size of that image. Whereas when I'm doing macro with my mobile phone, I can zoom, I've got different lenses to use, all before I even worry about using a wet lens. So there's a lot more creative control with the mobile phone, but it's far more difficult to use. If you then go to, say, a compact camera like a TG7, if you're into photography, I'd go TG7 every day, okay? But if you're interested whatsoever in video, I wouldn't go anywhere near any compact, including the TG7, because they're all terrible at video. It's a shame. A lot of it was to do with the fact that, unfortunately, there has been no development in compact cameras for years. When mobile phones started to become big and they took the market, nothing went into compact cameras. The TG7 really isn't any better than the TG5. It's had no development whatsoever. I was disappointed when they released the TG6 from a video point of view, and even more disappointed when the TG7 was released, and God knows if there'll ever be a TG8. And the same with the Sony RX system. Again, the photography side of things was fine, even from the first Sony RX camera, and nothing ever really improved, and the video never improved. And before long, mobile phones were taking all the photos, and there was no market left for compacts. So unfortunately, there's been no development. Now, whether that'll change in the future, who knows? It is one reason why I'm really starting to dabble in the mobile phone sector, because the amount of development and research going into mobile phones, especially the camera part, is probably bigger than anything else in that area now. The action cameras really need to pull their finger out before the mobile phones catch up. They're always going to have the advantage of that action aspect, in the sense that I can take a GoPro and put it on the side of the car and not worry about it, and people aren't going to use your phone in that circumstance. But certainly when people want more creative control and maybe underwater, then it really is getting to the point that the phone is going to become more popular. The GoPro, like I said, it is far less cost if you lose it, advantage. It is much easier to use, advantage. From a wide angle point of view, it makes much better footage than a mobile phone. From the ability to have spare SD cards and spare batteries, it is much easier. If I'm going on holidays, I'm taking an action camera every day of the week. When it comes to diving around home, I would use my mobile phone, because it gives me far more creative control, and I don't really care if I miss the shot. It's a lot harder to use. Now, going forward, I'll probably use a combination of both. Really, right now, if I was going on a holiday to, say, Indonesia, I would take both of them. I've already got to take my phone anyway. I've already got to take all my accessories for my GoPro. So the only thing different is taking the Divevolk housing, and then the hot shoe, or the cold shoe I should say, on the top of the Divevolk housing, I put an adapter on there and I can have an action camera, which at the moment I'm still using the GoPro, because it's still the better action camera for full-on underwater video, where you're using lights and filters and things like that. It is still better than the alternatives. If you're just attaching it to a mask and doing nothing else, then I get the point of some of the newer underwater white balancing that Insta and 360 and DJI have come up with. But for a serious underwater video, the GoPro beats them still, bar none, because of white balance lock and because of the picture quality. There is a difference between 5.3K and 4K every day of the week. So what I'd be doing is having my phone on the bottom In the cold shoe, I have a little adapter, and then I have my GoPro. I would take all the shots with the GoPro as far as wide angle, and my primary shots that I don't want to miss with my GoPro, and then I'd be using my mobile phone for those creative shots that are impossible to get with my GoPro. So the different macro shots, the different close-up shots, you know, the portraits of the fish, those sorts of things, and for photography. Because one thing that the GoPro sucks at underwater is photography. You can get some good shots, but they're very limited in what you can do, because if you want to shoot in RAW, you have to shoot in a full frame, and that is it. It's a very wide shot, and it's square. If you then use wet lenses, they all show up in the image when you're using the full frame. Whereas if I'm using the phone, I have access to the ultra-wide lens, the main lens, the telephoto lens, the macro lens, all the extra features, the fact that I can change everything about my shot in the app, especially using the Divevolk Housing, it takes a much better picture. So where I'd like to sit it is to say it's got more creative control than a GoPro. Its video isn't quite as good, but it is better at video than a compact camera. If you want to take photos, the mobile phone is better than the GoPro, but the TG7 or a compact camera will always take much better photography. So if you're only interested in photography, I personally would forget about mobile phones and GoPros and just go with a compact camera. You can get a TG7 or even a TG6 for very low money, and they do take amazing macro photography especially, or basic macro. That's a place to go if you're into photography. If you're not sure and you just want to dabble, your mobile phone. If you really want the best wide angle video and the easiest video, the action camera. So I know that's a lot of information, but I hope it helps you decide whether you use your mobile phone underwater. And to be honest, if you already own a mobile phone, the Divevolk Housing today is $229 US. It's not a lot of money. If you use my link, it's 5% off, and then you can use your mobile phone underwater and try it out. And if you don't use it for underwater photos and videos, it's still, you've got a housing that protects it on the boat. You can use it for snorkeling. You can use it for watching movies underwater. You can use it for a safety thing when you hit the surface and able to make a phone call. So it's not like if you get the Divevolk Housing that you're never just going to use that housing again if it doesn't work for you. Because I will say this, using a mobile phone is a lot trickier than using an action camera. If you want to just get into underwater videography and you don't want the learning curve, then try with an action camera first. If you want more photography than videography and you want to learn how to use a camera properly, then that's when a mobile phone can come in and you can learn all about shutter speeds and ISOs and white balance and things like that, and get far more creative control. If you've got any questions, please put a comment. I will try and answer all the comments there is. If there's anything else you'd like videos on, please let me know. Like I said, I'll be having more videos come around. I do this as a bit of fun, so I need to find it between my real job and time and weather, and I don't want to rush things out. And like I said, I will always be using footage from the items I'm talking about, so I'm not going to make a video if I don't have enough underwater footage with that particular camera or setup to be able to use it in the video. So until next time, please subscribe to my channel, like this video. You've already watched it to the end, so I really appreciate that. And don't forget to keep blowing the bubbles, and the deeper you go, the further you get away from all those idiots.